Enigma HUD. In nuclear strategy, there is a policy called no first use policy. As the name would imply, it means that your country refuses to use nuclear weapons first. The only countries that actually signed this pledge are China, which first introduced the policy in the first place, India, and North Korea. No other country has pledged not to use nuclear weapons first. They always have nuclear weapons as an option to use first in certain situations. Now, that's one thing. But on the other end of the spectrum, the exact opposite of no first use is something called the Samson option, which Israel has adopted. Now you might be thinking, hey, wait a minute, Israel doesn't have nuclear weapons. Well, actually, yeah, they do. They just never admitted they had any. In fact, they probably have more nuclear weapons than India does. Their nuclear program was bolstered heavily by the work of Edward Teller, in particular, who is the unofficial father of the hydrogen bomb. He and Ulam created the Teller-Ulam design, which is currently the most efficient and effective design for thermonuclear or hydrogen bombs. And yeah, they have a lot of nuclear weapons. Now, the Samson option is related to nuclear weapons, and it is named after the biblical character Samson. If you're not too familiar with your biblical characters, I'll briefly describe this guy. Samson was the guy with the very long hair, and God gave him incredible powers. He was super strong, but his strength was dependent on the length of his hair. If his hair was cut, he would lose all of his strength. Anyway, he had these enemies. I believe they were the Philistines, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And he was an Israelite, so he would go around killing all the Philistines until they discovered his weakness. He cut his hair. So they tricked him into revealing his secret, and then they cut his hair, and then he lost all of his strength, and then they captured him, and then they poked his eyeballs out, so he couldn't see anymore. Well, they wanted to execute him in a very public way, and they wanted to humiliate him as well. So they brought him to a temple, and all the Philistines were gathered at the temple, and they were there to mock him and watch him die. But by this time, Samson had already grown his hair back. So he was like, I'm gonna get these motherfuckers. So he asked one of the guards to allow him to lean against one of the pillars in the temple. And he did. He let him do that. And then he used his super strength to knock over the pillars. And in doing so, he killed all the Philistines in the temple along with himself. You know, it's like one of those, if I'm going down, I'm going to take all of you with me. So that kind of should illustrate exactly what the Samson option means. The Samson option means that if the existence of the state of Israel is threatened by foreign invasion, what they're going to do is they're going to take all their nuclear weapons and launch them in every single direction at all their enemies, trying to kill as many people as possible before they themselves are killed. How fucking stupid can you get? This is what we call a genocidal strategy. Because at this point you have completely relinquished any kind of bond you have with humanity. And you're only caring about yourselves. I think the problem here is that we humans don't really think of ourselves as humans. We think of ourselves as Israelis, as Americans, as Indians, as Canadians, whatever. We don't think of ourselves as human. That's a huge problem. That's a major problem, I think. Because if you don't think of yourself as human, then that means you don't think of other humans as humans. You think of them as the enemy, as somebody else, as somebody that you don't need to care about. We need to care about ourselves. We need to care about Israelis. We don't need to care about the Egyptians or the Iranians or the Iraqis or any of these other countries or the Palestinians. Don't have to care about them because they're not us. Division. Any petty division is enough for humans to hate each other. And I feel like the only way, I really don't know what it would take for humans to actually think of themselves as humans, other than an invasion by an extraterrestrial intelligence or something like that. But that's never going to happen. And even if it did, any extraterrestrial that's advanced enough to come here and for some reason wants to kill us all they would have to do is just throw a big asteroid on our planet and we all die and we'd all be dead before we knew we had a problem. So that's not going to work. I really don't know what it would take to unite humanity. I wish I did, but I don't. But I do know that we can't think of ourselves as these petty distinctions. Americans, Iranians, or any other distinction for that matter. We shouldn't think of ourselves as Muslim, or as Buddhists, or as Christians, or as Jews, or racial distinctions, black, white. No, that's stupid. Okay, because that kind of thinking is going to lead to genocide one of these days. And I think the Samson option clearly illustrates that problem. I don't know. Enigma Hood signing off.